And today on Putin on Blast, let's see why Russian missile attacks on Ukraine are a huge issue. From the Telegraph, Kiev shot down 44 Russian cruise missiles during massive strike. Ukraine shot down 44 more than 50 Russian cruise missiles launched at the country on October 31st. 44 cruise missiles were destroyed by the forces and the means of the Air Force. Glory to Ukraine, the Air Force Command said. They added the weapons were KH-101, KH-555 cruise missiles launched from Tu-95 and Tu-160 bombers. Regional authorities across Ukraine reported missile strikes on critical infrastructure overnight, with some 80% of Kiev residents left without water. Now, the chief of staff for President Zelensky didn't mince words, said Russian losers continue to wage war on civilian facilities. That is, by the way, a war crime under the Geneva Convention. Again from the Telegraph. Russia running out of ballistic missiles and no longer targeting Ukrainian bases. Russia has exhausted its core stocks of Iskander ballistic missiles and no longer is attacking Russian military bases. Shortage of the devastating weapons mean Russia has to change tactics and now exclusively targeting critical infrastructure. To replenish its ballistic missiles, Russia is turning to Iran and North Korea, he added. More than 7 meters long, capable of carrying nuclear warheads as well as conventional explosives. The Iskander was introduced in 2006 and reportedly cost about $2.5 million each. A single Iskander destroyed a railway station in the eastern town of Chaplin in August, killing 25 people. An Iskander is believed to have been used in an attack on a Ukrainian base in Mykolaiv in March. From Newsweek, Iranian ballistic missiles would cause disaster for Ukraine, Air Force says. Iranian ballistic missiles would mean disaster for Ukraine, a spokesman for Ukraine's Air Force said. Iran has pledged to provide Russia with surface-to-surface ballistic missiles as well as more attack drones for Vladimir Putin's troops to use in the war against Ukraine. 2 Iranian officials and 2 diplomats told Reuters last month that Iran and Russia came to a deal on October 6 when First Vice President Mohammad Mokbar, 2 senior officials from Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guards, and an official from the Supreme National Security Council visited Moscow for talks. Yuri Inat, spokesman for Ukraine's Air Force, said, "These are ballistic missiles. We have no effective attack against these missiles. It is theoretically possible to shoot them down, but in fact it is very difficult to do it with the means we have at our disposal. We have anti-air defense, not anti-missile defense." And that went on to say that Ukraine will take, quote, all measures to protect against these missiles. They will probably be delivered to the north of Ukraine. That's where they can be launched from in such a way as to threaten the whole of Ukraine, he said. Iran, they're already sanctioned. They're considered a pariah state by most people, and now I guess they really want to emphasize that point. Don't think that's what I would do. And from the Daily Beast, Putin parades new missile nightmare in latest warning to West. Putin has deployed missiles to Belarus in what is likely a desperate attempt to intimidate the West while its forces flounder in Ukraine, according to intelligence reports. Satellite images shared by British intelligence show 2 MiG-31 Foxhound interceptors stationed at Belarus's Mykolaiv airfield on the 17th of October. Located near the jets is a large canister, which the Ministry of Defense assesses to be likely containers for the KH-47M2 Kinzhal air-launched ballistic missile. The Kinzhals are hypersonic since they're reported to travel at over 5 times the speed of sound. Ukraine's current air defenses can't detect or destroy them. Russia may be conducting the deployment to send a signal to the West and pull Belarus further into the war, rather than preparing for an actual plot to unleash an attack on Ukraine. Hypersonics, as you can see from the conflict, is not necessarily the best use. Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering Heidi Shaiu said they've shot their Kinzhal hypersonic missiles against the dam, and the dam is still there. From Reuters, NASAM's air defense system has 100% success rate in Ukraine, Pentagon chief. U.S. provided NASAM air defense missiles have had a 100% success rate in Ukraine intercepting Russian missiles U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said on Wednesday from the Wall Street Journal. NATO says missile that hit Poland was likely Ukrainian air defense. Top NATO officials said there's no evidence that a missile that crashed in Poland, killing 2 people, was fired there intentionally, adding it was likely a Russian-made weapon fired by a Ukrainian air defense system. Russia unleashed one of the largest barrages of the war on Tuesday, firing 96 missiles at Ukrainian cities after being forced to withdraw from the southern city of Kherson last week in a major blow for Moscow. Missile landed in a Polish village near the Ukrainian border, killing 2 farm workers, raising fear of a wider confrontation. Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of NATO, said, "This is not Ukraine's fault. Russia bears ultimate responsibility." And Russia is not the only one firing off missiles. From the Kiev Independent, Ukraine's military executes over 100 strikes against Russian forces in Ukraine, destroys 2 ammunition depots. Southern Operational Command reported on November 16th that at least 17 Russian troops were killed over the past 24 hours on the southern front line. The Ukrainian military has destroyed 15 armored vehicles, 2 self-propelled artillery units, and an Orlan-10 drone. 2 Russian ammunition depots in Kherson Oblast, Olsheki, and Nova Kakhovka areas were destroyed. Command also reported that Russia continues to keep 14 ships in the Black Sea, including 4 missile carriers with 20 caliber cruise missiles on board. If you want to get serious about helping the Ukrainians stop this missile threat, the best thing we can send them is the MIM-104 Patriot. While it's true that it did have a problem back during the first Gulf War, the computer on board and radars had been on for 100 hours straight, by which time the internal clock had drifted by 1/3 of a second. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it can make it hard to hit the target. That's been fixed and tested. That's not a problem anymore. Some people say we shouldn't send that because that might fall into Russian hands. Like they say, well, the NLAW fell into Russian hands. The Javelin fell into Russian hands. The Stinger fell into Russian hands. One, I'd be surprised the Stinger didn't fall into Russian hands way back during the Afghan-Russian War in the 1980s. As far as the other 2, well, all 3 of them actually, they're man-pads, meaning someone on the front line is carrying the thing on himself. A position can get overrun. Somebody can get shot while the position is getting overrun, and the other side is going to collect up any kind of equipment that they don't immediately recognize and send it to the rear to be looked at. The fact that these were frontline weapons, basically infantry weapons, this isn't a big surprise. I mean, at the start of World War II, we had the bazooka and nobody had anything like it. And during the early phases of the war in North Africa, an American infantry unit was overran and a lot of people killed, and the Germans collect a bazooka system, and they sent it back to Berlin and they checked it out. That was 1942, and by 1944, when the D-Day landings at Normandy, they had developed what they called the Panzerfaust, which was actually an easier weapon to use than the bazooka, as it only required 1 person instead of 2, and it had a larger warhead, so that a frontline weapon like one of those would be picked up and sent on to be looked at. That's no big surprise, but the Patriot is not a frontline system. It's made to be put back in the rear to protect cities, to protect infrastructure, and the likelihood of something like that being acquired by the Russians, highly unlikely, if not impossible. We have talked about sending the MIM-23 Hawk, which dates all the way back to the 1960s. The Patriot replaced it, but this isn't your father's Hawk missile system. The Hawk 21 is way more advanced. It uses the MPQ-64 Sentinel radar, which is the same thing that the NASAM uses. The missiles are upgraded to the MIM-23K standard, has improved blast fragmentation warhead, creates a larger lethal zone. It's also effective against short-range tactical ballistic missiles, something like the Scud or the different variants that I'm sure the Russians are still using. They're fighting against drones, and drones are, well, at anywhere from $500,000 to $3 million a piece for a missile for one of the systems I just talked about. Firing them at a drone is not an inexpensive proposition. However, we do have something sitting in the boneyard somewhere called the M163 Vulcan Air Defense System. It sits on top of a 113 chassis, or it can be towed. And what this is a M168 variant of the 20mm Vulcan rotary cannon that's been the standard on most combat aircraft since the 1960s. It has a lead calculating sight to keep you in front of your target. It can fire 10, 60, 100 round bursts, fire 1,000 round burst if you want to really get crazy with it. That's good for taking down drones. And a 20 millimeter round is a whole lot less expensive, or even 3,000, which is what the vehicle can carry, is less expensive than going out and firing a $3 million missile at a drone. But if we're going to get serious about not having Ukraine bomb back to the Stone Age, we have to get these systems over there to them, or at the very least, as far as the Patriot goes, get it along the border with Poland, because we don't need any more missiles of any type falling on a NATO member. It's better for that missile to be blown up in the air, where at altitude the explosion is certainly going to draw everyone's attention and give them more than enough time to get to cover with the shrapnel and pieces falling down to the ground. And that's better than just having a missile that's run out of its propellant fall down and blow up with no warning. At the very least, we need to get the Vulcan air defense system and the Hawk 21 system to the Ukrainians in short order, because no matter how much money and gold has been sequestered in Western accounts that belongs to the Russian government, it's not going to be enough to rebuild that country if we allow it to be bombed back to the Stone Age. Well, hey, I'm done ranting for today. YouTube really likes it if you like and subscribe. Just like. That's more than enough for me. Anyways, I'll see you tomorrow. Drink one for me and have a good evening. See ya.